imposter.
Dave, why don't you tell us a little bit, possibly using some metaphors, because I know that you're great using comics and characters, fictional characters. Why don't you explain exactly what is the imposter syndrome for people to understand what that is?
Perfect. Imposter syndrome is that belief that you're not as good as you could be. And it not only splits you into two different versions of yourself, one that's all singing, all dancing, all brilliant, but slightly darker, and one that's possibly showing you the light, but feels a little bit scared that people might find out because you're too honest, too transparent. And in many ways, that's the voices in your head saying you're not going to be able to make it. So you just don't think you can make it. From a point of view of comics and superheroes, you got to look at the characters that are split into two sides. So often you've got somebody where they put the dark side as being the evil one. So for instance, if you take Batman and Bruce Wayne, which one was the imposter?
I don't believe this. How could they put me at the kids' table? I'm 14. I'm Batman. No, you're not!
You could be Batman. Sure, I'm Batman. See?
Is he really Batman faking himself as Bruce Wayne? Or let's take, for instance, Superman. Is he really Superman pretending to be Clark Kent? Or is he Clark Kent masquerading as Superman? Well, if you look at these two different versions, we all have two different sides to us. As to which is the strongest one and which is the one that could really make it, you'll find that throughout your entire career, there's certain times that you felt really confident just being you. And you go into the zone. It could be when you're playing sports. It could be when you're doing the accounts. It could be when you're programming something. That is the real you. That's a superhero version of you. It's a bit that's not doing that feels like the imposter. And in many cases, your self-talk takes you down, so you never get to the high heights of what you can really do when you go in the zone.
We call it being in the zone, on a roll, in the groove.
So in other words, the imposter syndrome is like if you're having your negative alter ego. And we were talking about this a little bit earlier, but I mean, if we talk about Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
There he is. There's your man. But doctor, this is impossible. I know it is. But there's your man. I'm sorry, sir. You appear to be serious, but look!
The best way for you to understand this is like if you watch one of those cartoons or one of these movies where you had an angel and then you had a devil in each one of your shoulders. And one was telling you, you can do stuff. And the other one is telling you, no, you cannot do anything because you're an idiot. And then you have like a conflict inside of your head, which is prohibiting you of actually getting that accomplished.
Excuse me, George. Jorge. How you doing? My name is Lucifer.
George, don't do it.
Excuse me, I'm talking. My name is Lucifer.
I'm talking now.
I'm introducing myself. My name is Lucifer. My friends call me Lucy.
I wouldn't be surprised if we dug deep enough to see that this is actually driven by religious programming. And I don't mean it with disrespect to any particular, but that whole point about you shouldn't try and get above who you are because you're then going to damage everybody around you was driven in many cases by the rich landowners who wanted people to, for instance, if you take that phrase, you know, as poor as a church mouse, like it's noble to be poor, that was created by the rich landowners who owned the land where the churches were. And they told the church, the masters of the church, the pastors or the clerics, keep people feeling small so they don't attack us and take all our money. So I wouldn't be surprised if that imposter syndrome is generated, linked to spiritual reasons, and right across the board, it happens in many, I mean, it's not many cultures, many religions, just to keep people in their place.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, if you think about it, 76.9% of all females experience imposter syndrome at one point or the other. And in the case of males, it's 76.4%. So the numbers are very similar. However, it is something that there's some people which are not getting affected by this. What is very interesting is that this is a recurring problem. It's not something that it happened to you once. It happens every time.
I also want to throw in education. Because all the way through your educational system, you're told you can't do that, you can only do this. You've got a constant scoring system that says you are only as good at this level. And if the only way you're graded is the traditional maths and English and sciences, but nobody teaches you how to do art, or nobody teaches you how to do sports, you'll always have that imposter syndrome when you try and shift, because everything tells you you're no good at stuff, but you find you're good at something, but nobody believes you. So I think a lot of that conditioning starts at a very young age and works its way up. So when we're talking about how it affects it, let's talk about how it affects celebrities and pop stars then.
From the minute Steve called me until the minute I got on set, I was certain every day that he was going to call me and tell me he'd made a mistake. You know, I suffered from acute imposter syndrome. Like, how on earth did I pull one over him to give me this role?
One of the best examples is Neil Armstrong was at an event with successful business people and creatives, and he looked out over the crowd and he said, "These people are doing great things. All I did was follow orders."
So if you take some of our all-time best and most decorated actors, Tom Hanks, probably the most popular actor of all time, or certainly living actor of all time. Then you've got Kate Winslet, Penelope Cruz, Meryl Streep, won loads of Oscars, but feels imposter syndrome. J-Lo, Jennifer Lopez, Jodie Foster, Lady Gaga, one of the top singers of all time. Serena Williams. I mean, if you go through the names, Michelle Pfeiffer, Robert Pattinson, the new Batman, all of them have felt it. Now, what I'd like to say is, clearly, when they go in to be vulnerable, their art allows them to dig deep into that vulnerability, and that brings out some of their very best work. So they feel it and they overcome it. But you've also got to balance it up with people who we know are in the same game, but you'd never say have got that problem. So if you compare Lady Gaga, who comes across as incredibly empathetic and vulnerable, but also a huge pop star, next to Madonna, who's very similar, Madonna comes across as a narcissist, as somebody, for instance, I don't know if she is, but certainly her career has always been, this is me, I don't care, I'm going to do it my way. And her successes have been built on the fact that she's reinvented herself a number of times and got over that hump of fear. Now, one of the ways that she did it, her business model was to work with new upcoming stars as Madonna. So when a new producer came out with a new type of music, she'd make an album with them, like William Orbit, and she made Ray of Light, completely great album. He gets his accolades, she gets her Grammys, and then she gets another one afterwards. So maybe piggybacking with talent is a way of getting through that.
Who are the only people that do not feel the imposter syndrome? Because I mean, who are the only ones?
I think the ones that probably don't feel it quite so much are people who are narcissists. So they just are in denial about anything that doesn't position them as being fantastic. They just won't listen to it. And people have made a career out of deception because they probably feel it, but they don't let it out and they ignore it to the point where it's not a thing. So you're going to be looking at liars, you're going to look at cheats, you can talk at criminals, thieves, BS artists, and everyone can guess what BS stands for. So for instance, let's take one of the most famous cases in music, and I used to look a lot like Milli Vanilli. What happened was they were on stage and they'd won Grammys. They were like the most loved and adored and sexiest double act on the planet, as far as most people, most women at least, were concerned. But then when they're playing on stage, their tape recorder got stuck. And so they couldn't sing live because it kept going, roo, roo. And it was revealed that they were faking and miming on stage. Now, many people do fake and mime, but when it came around to them recording a song with their actual voices, it was terrible. They couldn't shake it. They had to give back their Grammys that were recorded by somebody else. And after that, the shame was so embarrassing that they basically, one of them took his own life years later, and the other one's got an incredibly low profile. So maybe while you're winning, it's fine. If you can get away with the murder, it's fine. But if you get caught on the downside, then the impending doom that comes with it is like imposter syndrome times whatever number that you got away with.
There's several different kinds of imposter syndrome. See, for example, rock stars that want to get a lot of attention, a lot of adulation by the fans. just think about how they felt throughout the pandemic. I mean, they didn't really have any attention whatsoever. So they just look at themselves in the mirror, and they were definitely very much affected. In fact, if you don't have that maturity to process that, that can really affect your life. I mean, you were mentioning about the 27-year curse. So, I mean, possibly you can explain what that is, because it's just shocking.
Well, I mean, when you talk about the yin and yang of being an artist and an entertainer, you basically have an amplified life when you're in front of your audience, and then you have to tone it down and switch it off when you're off stage. If you don't do that, you go slightly crazy. So for many comedians, people like Jim Carrey and Robin Williams and Jim Belushi, they were on fire all the time. And so when you're not on stage and you're trying to make everybody laugh, eventually people just don't laugh so much. So then you get depressed because you're not having such an impact. And so that's a real challenge for comedians. For any artist or any speaker or any entertainer, you need to have that ecosystem built up for you, waiting for the opportunity to go out in front of an audience and get that applause. It's addictive. And if you don't get it, then you start doubting yourself. That's why so many people are going on Facebook Live and just doing anything. For you and I, we found an outlet doing this show. So we could still present, we could still perform. But in the history of music, for instance, there have been a number of people who didn't make it past that whole situation. And the magic number for that depression, catching up with the talent, catching up with the need to evolve, and maybe not making it because of the fact that you'd gone so far down your own rabbit hole, you got to look at people like James Dean, died at 27, Jimi Hendrix, 27, Amy Winehouse, 27, Kurt Cobain from Nirvana, 27. You look at Janis Joplin, all these stars all passed at 27. It's like a curse that affects entertainers. Why it happens at that age, I don't know, but certainly what happened to them, we can all appreciate.
Anyone who thinks 13 is the unluckiest number should take a closer look at 27. Once you realize just how many celebrities have died at that age, it starts to get a little distressing.
You can't handle the truth!
Let's say that you were a general. Let's say that you were a lieutenant or a colonel or a sergeant major, whatever your rank is. Not only on the military, but also if you were the president of the company or the CEO, and then you retire, you start also having these feelings. So this is also something interesting to keep in mind.
I told you if you were ever a shrimp boat captain, that I'd be your first mate. Well, here I am. I am a man of my word.
Okay.
Yeah, but don't you be thinking that I'm gonna be calling you sir.